Scouting combine started today. We heard a little bit from John Lynch. I see you in the chat already. It was a little bit boring. I saw somebody say that. Don't disagree there, but there were some takeaways. We're going to talk about that. But we're also about a week or so away from the legal tampering period, maybe 12 days or so. And there's a lot of little things going on that we got to discuss. Suneil and I are going to do that next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. It's Tuesday, which means I got my guy, So Real, Suneil, in the building, rocking the sick sweatshirt, the hoodie. What's up, Suneil?
Doing fantastic, my man. Just out here living the dream. Not just a dream, the dream.
The dream. Okay. All right.
We're not going to keep it. We are not going to keep it politically correct like John Lynch did. We are actually going to answer some questions in this show.
Yeah. We definitely are. We definitely are. So let's get this out of the way, because I feel like I gotta imagine that at this point everybody has talked about it on their channel, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we might also come away with a few different things that other people came away with. Press conference today. What were your takeaways from what John Lynch said, if any?
I mean, Lynch is being Lynch, right? Very politically correct.
Yeah.
And my takeaways were just where the consistencies have been in messaging, and where maybe some of the consistencies have been different. So one major consistency is Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, I think there was some questions about, are they going to bring back Jimmy? Because we don't know what's going on with Brock. They answered that Jimmy's going to be somewhere else. So that, at least, I know you put up a tweet either yesterday or the day before where you were talking, or maybe it was today, where you were talking about how it's the same narrative over and over for the 49ers. At least Jimmy Garoppolo won't be someone talked about this offseason, right? So he's going elsewhere, and that's one thing. It was nice him, picking out certain players like Diamador Lenore. I thought got a lot of shine, which is great. That might give us some insight as to whether what they do, maybe in the offseason as far as free agency. I thought they might bring in another corner, but if they do believe in Diamador Lenore, maybe they just go through the draft to find some corners, or maybe get like a lesser tier, maybe backup instead of a starting caliber corner. The thing, though, that I think I read, and look, I could be reading this wrong. Look, we don't know what's going on with Brock Purdy. I think that initially,
I'm giving him a high five. He says he feels like the camera is so good that I can reach into my phone and give a high five. So you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
I love it. No, I think that it was a little, not alarming, but more question marks about Brock Purdy. I think initially there was more of a sentiment that they understood what the timeline was, and that he's going to be ready as far as on the roster week 1 to be potentially a backup, maybe even in training camp, fighting for the starting position. It looked like Lynch was tempering all expectations of what that timeline could be. They don't know, and I think that's interesting, because that 6-month number doesn't seem so legit anymore. Not saying that it's not going to be 6 months, but I think how secure they are in that 6 months, I don't know if that's true.
Well, yeah, and I mean 6 months is, even if they are secure, 6 months is now a different timeline, because it's pushed back at the least 2 weeks. I mean, they're going to meet with the surgeon at the end of this week. They hope they can have surgery next week if the swelling's gone down, and that was a word that he used, was hope, which is, again, not so concrete. When we heard them, at least when we heard Shanahan in the end of season presser, it was like, oh yeah, no, he's ready to go. I mean, he'll be ready for training camp. That's the plan. We're going to do the brace. We'll have surgery this date. we're good here 6 months. And it's like, well, not necessarily. That's not how it's played out thus far. We've already had a 2-week setback. So 2 week, I mean, every day at this point matters. Literally every day matters. Every hour matters because we are on a tight timeline as is. You add 2 weeks to that, and all of a sudden it just pushes things down. So, it's interesting. The one thing they did say, or he did say, was how did he word it? It was Jimmy Garoppolo. He was asked about Jimmy Garoppolo coming back, and he's like, yeah, that's ran its course. So I was like, okay, got it. Hey, we love everything that Jimmy brought, but that one has ran its course. So, all right, fair enough. And so that was definitely clear again. The messaging, to your point, stayed very consistent there. We talked about Trey a little bit. I think his messaging with Trey stayed consistent, reiterating that he needs to remain healthy and that if he's given the opportunity, he needs to take the bull by the horns. Yep, that's pretty much what he said about a month ago. One thing that I also took away, though, was what our perception was of Wilks as a defensive coordinator. And I felt like that was backed up today. Mm-hmm. And he was asked about Wilks. He was asked about D'Amico Ryans. And he talked about how both of them have a similar personality and that they can galvanize the troops. They can really take over a room and that they're leaders of men, which is what we had heard about Wilks. It's what we knew D'Amico was. And we thought that was a big reason for the hire. Well, it sounds like that was actually a big reason for why they made the hire, is because they felt like from a consistent standpoint, a lot of the same philosophy Wilks likes to do as far as on the field were there, but also a personality fit was there. And that was the biggest thing. And so that was good to hear because that was speculation on our part. I think it was a pretty educated guess, but it was still a bit of speculation, and that was definitely backed up. So just the fact that they do feel so comfortable with Wilks, I think is nice to hear as well.
Yeah, and I think the two other takeaways, one, I think gives us some clarity as far as what they're going to be focused on as far as offensive line. He mentioned McGlinchey most likely isn't going to be somebody that they're going to be able to bring back, that he's going to be too expensive for them. So that, I think, gives some clarity as far as, I think, obviously they're potentially going to be restructuring some contracts and freeing up some cap space. I thought that might mean that they are probably bringing back McGlinchey or could be trying to bring back McGlinchey. He kind of reiterated that wasn't going to be the case because he's going to be too expensive. So most likely McKivitz and, draft somebody, you would think. But the other thing was the fact that he talked about Javon Kinlaw. To me, that was quite interesting that, he's talking about, hey, Javon's working out. Like he's, I could see him out my window and he looks good and all this kind of stuff. I really hope they are not banking on Javon Kinlaw. I hope that Javon Kinlaw starts off as a backup defensive lineman for the 49ers. If he is a starter for the 49ers week 1, this offseason to me would be a disaster.
Well, okay, to be fair, they can say all these things, but actions speak louder than words. Right. When they don't pick up the 5th-year option, we're going to know that they are not all in on Javon Kinlaw. So, I mean, Kinlaw, a lot of people are like, oh, we got to get rid of him and we got to save some money. You're not going to save money by getting rid of him. So Kinlaw is likely going to be on this team. And if he's going to be on this team, then, he'll be a rotational piece and maybe he can earn a starting job and that'd be great. But there's no reason to pencil him in as the starter or count on him to be the starter or count on him to be healthy or to play at a high level because we haven't seen that yet. And so there's also no reason to pick up his 5th-year option, unfortunately, for him. So I agree with that.
If he can earn his way into a starting position, they didn't do what they needed to do this offseason, which is find a perennial starter for the 49ers at that interior defensive line alongside Arik Armstead. There should be no chance Javon Kinlaw can earn a starting position. That means they didn't bring in the type of talent that they should have this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, unless he just somehow balls out of control, like this is a completely different player, which, that's hard to believe, but whatever. We'll see. Giants Niner fan says, we keep hearing 6 months. Is that fully ready or ready to start throwing? Okay. So let's just go through the options and what we know here thus far. You have 3 surgery options, depending on what is actually going on. What they believe from the MRI is that you're going to have an internal brace, which is, I guess, the best way to put it in layman's terms is that it's a thick cord that they put on the tendon to help hold things together. And that attaches to the UCL and helps just make things stronger permanently. It'll always be there. That is the 6-month portion. We saw Nick Mullins have this same surgery as Michael talks about here. And at 3 months or so, you start throwing, usually with a smaller football or a smaller ball. You work your way up to a football. And then the hope is at that 6-month mark, you are fully ready to go. Now, what Michael's pointing to here, I think, is a misconception, because even when I went back and looked at that, I thought it was 5 months as well, but that wasn't actually the case. So what happened with Mullins was he was signed at the 5-month mark by the Eagles, but it was strategically done after OTAs, so he wouldn't have to throw because he wasn't fully ready to just go in and start competing. So he basically was signed at the 5-month mark, which was like around June 10th-ish, but he didn't have to start competing and throwing until closer to that 7-month mark once training camp came around. And that was done strategically because he wasn't fully ready to enter a competition. Otherwise, they would have signed him a week or two earlier and had him compete in OTAs. They chose not to do that because he was ready to sign, but he wasn't ready to actually get into a throwing regimen and just throw day after day after day. So the 5-month mark is what you're going to hear a lot, but when you do the research on it, it was not 5 months that he was fully ready to go. It did take, we knew he was ready at that 6.5-month mark because that's when we actually saw it happen. But at 5 months, he was not ready to go. And so I wouldn't expect that Purdy is either. You know, it sounds like anywhere from 5 to 7 months. 6 months is that normal thing, and that is fully ready to go. But again, this timeline, 2 weeks makes a world of a difference right now. 6 months from the end of February is a lot different than 6 months, 10 days into March. I mean, one is, hey, you have a couple weeks before the season starts to really get things going and get ready. And the other one is, the season starts in like 2 days. So very, very different circumstances now versus what it was before. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, everybody heals differently, and the thought is for sure, I mean, that they want to do that internal brace, but then there is another option that they get in there and say, okay, it's a little bit worse than what we thought. We do a hybrid where it's like an internal brace, but they also add a little plate and a screw. That's about a 9-month recovery. And then a Tommy John surgery means that UCL is completely obliterated, and they've got to take from a different part of the body. I think it's from the hamstring, and they give you a whole new rebuild, and that's about a 12-month recovery. So that's what we're talking about as far as Brock Purdy being ready. Those are the options. And so, yeah, that's what it is. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully the swelling will be down at the end of the week, and then they can operate early next week, and he'll be ready as quickly as possible. Hopefully by the end of August, but I would think at the very least, if it's the UCL repair, I guess, or brace, then he would be ready to go by week 1. And that would be great for the 49ers for sure. Because, I mean, even if it's in a backup role, it'd be nice to have Brock Purdy on this team. No doubt about it. All right, let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk. And this is going to get into a little bit of an overarching conversation. But the 49ers always wait until the final year to sign guys.
Right.
They don't usually sign guys early. And sometimes that works out well in their favor. Sometimes that bites them in the butt. I think, to be fair, let me say this about Bosa. I think the Bosa family shows that they're not going to sign early either. So I don't think Bosa was an actual possibility last offseason. But let's say it was, and you chose not to sign him. Well, now all of a sudden he's Defensive Player of the Year. The salary cap's gone up. You're costing yourself some money. A real life situation is something like what the Ravens did, where they could have signed Lamar Jackson, not this last offseason, but the offseason prior. They chose not to. Well, then Deshaun Watson gets a fully guaranteed contract, and now you're seeing an issue where they may not be able to keep Lamar Jackson because of some of these things that are going on around the league. So the question to you is, are we at a point where the 49ers should consider re-signing Brandon Aiyuk this offseason, what are some of the risks with that? What are some of the good things that can come with that? And what would you do if you were running this front office?
So if I was the front office, I would absolutely do it. And there's
Okay.
two reasons why I would. One, this is going to be the best negotiating year for the 49ers with Brandon Aiyuk. He had his best season, but it's his best season, right? It wasn't any kind of record breaking like what Debo did as far as his season when they negotiated his contract. So if you were seeing the trajectory, he's getting better year after year after year. Next year, Brandon Aiyuk has another step forward. Now he's going to be demanding probably more than what he could demand right now. So that's the one reason. I think you could get Brandon Aiyuk on like a steal of a deal based off of what his trajectory is and the fact that he fits this system so well. The second reason is the cap is about to explode I think it's supposed to be next year. So if you can get so I assume with the explosion of the cap, the contract demands are going to be much higher as well. So if you can get Aiyuk to sign right now, I think financially it's going to make the most sense for the 49ers just because you could be paying Aiyuk. Aiyuk's number could be kind of what's happening with Mahomes, right? Mahomes' number is about to be probably like the 10th highest paid quarterback, even though he's worth number one. He's playing at the number one level, right? So I think you could get Brandon Aiyuk on a deal like that, where maybe his number is, higher because obviously whoever gets a new contract is bigger. But as you go year into that deal, he starts becoming more and more of a steal based off of what you're paying him, based off of his performance. I think there's zero chance Brandon Aiyuk signs early, though, because all of that is in favor of the 49ers. Obviously, for him, there's some stability to know that, hey, I have a long-term contract and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm Brandon Aiyuk, I'm banking on myself to have another breakout year and start demanding top level money.
Well, the question now becomes, and I see some people talking about the salary cap, and I dropped a video about the salary cap a couple days ago pertaining to Eric Armstead and should they restructure him and all the things that go into that. But I'm seeing a little bit of a fundamental issue in waiting on restructuring, or not restructuring, but extending some of these guys the way that they do. And especially this offseason where they can be real players in free agency without having to restructure some of these guys that are approaching 30 or are a little bit older than 30. And letting Bosa wait until July or August is great. You're going to free up money eventually, but you could have freed that up earlier and made some signings. And so do you think the 49ers should, at the very least, if they're going to wait till that final season, make a philosophy shift? And it's like, listen, if this is a cornerstone guy, just get it done. Do what it takes to get it done. Do it before free agency so that you can go out and make these moves. And I think a good example of this is the 49ers, again, you look at most of their big players, they're signed much later. However, the one exception that I can think of is Eric Armstead. And remember, they made that signing early with him and Ward because they wanted to see where that money was. And then they just immediately traded Buckner before the draft. They were able to get some capital because of that and free up that space. So they knew going into it, they had a much clearer picture. Do you think, especially when you've got a cornerstone piece, that philosophy should change a little bit and they should just hammer it out and get it done early?
Absolutely. I mean, I think John Lynch mentioned that too. He was talking about how he wishes they could just get it done earlier. I don't know who's driving that philosophy. It doesn't seem to be Lynch. Maybe it's ownership. Maybe it's Parag. Maybe, I don't know who has the say in all that. Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. When there's a player that you want to sign, you're going to sign, right, in Bosa. And I think Aiyuk falls under that as well. Get those contracts out of the way, see what you can do to add to that versus pushing it to the next year, right? Especially when this is a market where I think there's certain players out there that can really benefit the 49ers. And like I said, I think if I want to sign a free agent, I want to sign him this year, Jesse, versus next year, because once the cap goes up, those contracts are going to go up as well. So if you can get a guy like Jesse Bates or a guy like Hargrove Hargrave, I mean, on contracts from this year, I think that's a lot smarter than trying to get whomever the free agents are next year, because they're going to be demanding much more money.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. Double B Studios says Shanahan is hard on receivers unless it's Debo. Well, Debo did have a story where he talked about he wore that visor his rookie year because he cussed out Shanahan all the time. He didn't want Shanahan to see it. So I think he's hard on everybody. Some people take to it a little bit differently than others. And definitely, I mean, it seems like Debo, now has probably earned some of that cachet to where he doesn't have to be as hard on him. But I think Shanahan is hard on players that are young because he's trying to set a tone with them. I think that's fair. I mean, it's easier as a leader to set the tone early with young guys and then pull back a little bit versus if you ease into it and you're nice and a little easygoing, it's harder to ramp it up. And that's kind of a leadership 101 thing. So, but I hear what you're saying. What's up, Davo? He says, what do you think about people saying Trey should ask for them to trade him somewhere else? I mean, I understand it to a certain extent. If he's not going to be the guy and they know he's not going to be the guy, I mean, why would you want to stick around? You got to get your career started. So I understand it from that standpoint. But now with this Purdy injury and the timeline, I think there's a real opportunity for Trey to be the guy. And so there's no reason to look outside this organization, at least not right away.
Jesse, can you inform me where this narrative that they don't believe he's the guy is coming from?
I mean, I think it's a lot of speculation. I'll
based
tell
off
you.
Of what though?
Well, okay. I'll say I think a lot of it is based off of what players are saying. Frankly, I think two things go into this. I think you hear a lot of players saying that they want Purdy to be the guy or he should be the front runner and all these things, and he's earned it and whatever. And then you hear Shanahan or players also say that, well, Shanahan basically has a coalition of leaders and he really takes into account what they've got to say. And so I think you start to piece parts of the puzzle together and you say, well, they want Purdy to be the guy. And so that doesn't necessarily mean you don't believe in Trey, but you believe probably in Purdy a little bit more. And I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I just... you mentioned it earlier. Actions speak louder than words. For sure. And I think all of the actions that that Shanahan and Lynch have taken have shown me that they do believe he's the guy. And what I mean by that is, they brought him in first year, right? And I think there's two philosophies as far as when you bring in a rookie quarterback. You can start him right away and give him the reps, or you can have him redshirt basically. And then you play them the next year, right? And so they decided to do the red shirt thing because they obviously had Jimmy Garoppolo, who had taken the team to the Super Bowl. And I think on top of that, I don't think Trey necessarily showed enough to them where he was that much better than Jimmy to where it made sense, right? As far as, okay, just redshirt him. He didn't play all last year. Redshirt him and we'll do the 2-year model, right? And then when year 2 came, he made a decision. Kyle Shanahan, this is my starter. To the point where he's like, yo, Jimmy, you just took us to the NFC Championship game. Awesome. You can go seek a trade if you want. Go talk to teams. Like, figure it out. We don't want to bring you back. It wasn't until Jimmy did his rounds with his agent, realized that nobody was willing to trade for him. Nobody was willing to give him the type of money. And he basically came hand in hand and said, look, I want to stay on this team. And Shanahan and the team said, look, you're going to have to take a significant pay cut to where you're actually paid less than Trey, which was the case, right? We went into the season that Jimmy was on an incentive-laden deal, but his base salary was less than Trey Lance because Trey was the starter. It wasn't until Trey was out for the season that Jimmy got playing time, Brock got playing time. I don't see a case or any kind of decision-making from Shanahan or from Lynch or whatever that's showing me that Trey Lance isn't who they believe in. I think all of it is actually they believe in him. He just needs to be available, right? And that's been the problem. As far as players talking about Purdy, they're going to talk about whoever's hot at the moment. Like Purdy, they were talking about Purdy and saying the things about Purdy because they've seen and played and won with Purdy. I think there's a camaraderie that gets built week after week after week when you're going through a playoff push, when you're winning games together, when you're on the battlefield together. That's what they had with Jimmy. That's what they had started building with Purdy. They just haven't had the chance to build that with Trey. So to me, I expect players to talk about the players that they actually have played with and won with, and be like, yeah, that's the guy I want to go with, because you build that camaraderie. We both played sports. The players that you're playing with are always going to be who the bond is more than anybody on the bench or, the injured guys and stuff like that. So to me, whatever the players are saying isn't a true depiction of, to me, who's the better quarterback. It's just who they feel more comfortable with because they've gone through those battles together. So I don't know where this narrative is being created, because to me, Shanahan has done everything to point me in the direction that that's the guy that he feels like is his quarterback of the future.
So you think that if Purdy is fully healthy, doesn't have offseason surgery, you think that like they want Trey to be the starter out of those two?
Yeah, I think they'd have a competition, and I think in Shanahan's mind, Trey's going to win it out.
Okay. Listen, I love the confidence. I just feel differently about it. And
why I think that is because they've never said it the opposite way either. They've said that, that Purdy, I think, was like, hey, they want Purdy to be there and compete. Shanahan didn't say Purdy's my guy. It's compete. If he was that much better, or they were like, yeah, he's going to be the guy, they would have said it. Right. Yeah. But I think that at the end of the day, Purdy, obviously he could win with Purdy. That's a great situation to be in. I think he thinks that he could dominate with Trey if Trey could be healthy. And that's the big if, right? So I at least for me, I haven't seen anything that makes me believe that they still don't want Trey to be the guy.
Yeah. And I think, to me, like, that would be the right mindset. And I said that I believed this was going into the playoffs. People are like, well, what is the breaking point that Purdy has to do in order to win the job? And I said, I think anything short of winning the Super Bowl, like, he shouldn't be handed the job at all. Like, you win the Super Bowl, that's okay, I get it. But if you go to the NFC Championship or you go to a Super Bowl, we've done that before. They were willing to move off of a quarterback that had just done that the year prior. So why would they not be willing to move off of Purdy? So I think in theory, I agree with it. And it would be nice if we knew that Shanahan thought that. I don't know. Like I said, we talked about this a little bit last week, but we saw this team have a similar decision in front of them going into the 2021 season and decided not to move off of the guy that they had done those things with in favor of sitting Trey Lance. And so I just felt like the situation would be similar here, where they would say it's a competition, or they would open it up or whatever. But really, I mean, unless he plays perfect and it's more on Purdy to all of a sudden just suck, that he wouldn't be the starter. But that, maybe, I mean, we're never going to know, because it's not going to play out that way, because Purdy is hurt now. And I love the confidence. I mean, I do genuinely believe in my heart of hearts that if it is an open competition, a true open competition, that Trey wins that. And I think he wins it going away. That's me personally. But I just am not sure in my heart of hearts that it would be a true open competition.
Well, I think that year 3 of Trey, 3 years in this system, is much different than rookie Trey coming into a situation where he has missed a whole year of football, right? I expect year 3, third year in the system, even though he hasn't gotten reps and all that kind of stuff, I still expect him to be way ahead of other quarterbacks, because I think he should be a bona fide starter in this league. So he needs to prove that. I don't think it's wrong for the expectations to be like, no, man, you can't keep acting like you're a rookie quarterback. You're 30 years in now. You can't be making rookie mistakes anymore. Even if you don't have the experience, you've still been in the league for 3 years at this point, right? So I think the expectation is not necessarily seasoned vet quarterback, but you got to be pretty far along. Third-year quarterback, you always mention, after 3 years, you know what you have. Well, it's his third year, whether he's played or not. We still need to see something out of him, and I think we would.
Tango India Mike, appreciate you becoming a member. As far as Deron Payne goes, he's asking about Deron Payne with him being tagged. Who else on the table for us? I mean, there's plenty of options. Deron Payne, technically, I think still might get traded. So I don't think he's off the table, but you're going to have to give up some assets and pay him. There's a lot out there. At least for me, I really liked Deron Payne. I wanted him at the trade deadline. He was my guy that I really wanted the 49ers to go get. I would have been ecstatic if they got him. I don't know if paying 2 defensive tackles elite money is a way to win long term. So I'm going to fill in maybe a piece or two on the defensive tackle front through free agency, but I'm also going to look towards the draft to really fill it long term. I think if you're going to pay anybody on the defensive line through free agency, it should be an edge rusher. And even then, I'm looking at some of these 1-year guys saying, all right, well, they can go get, let's say, a Houston on a 1-year rental. They can go get Buddy, who just came from the Eagles, that played for the Bears. Hargrave. No, not Hargrave. Defensive end. Had 18.5 sacks a year and a half ago. Didn't do a lot last year. He'll be cheap. So they can go get Quinn, I think it is. They can go get pieces like that and fill in for a year that will plug in. So I don't know. I don't think paying a lot of money was ever the right move long term for this team. That's my opinion. Double B Studios says BA won't get the bag until Debo's gone. Yeah, I mean, his 5th-year option is going to be picked up. Technically, they're going to have to pay him after that year. That'll be slightly before Debo's fully gone. Although, at that point, you can trade Debo. I see what you're saying. I think his contract becomes a lot more tradable, so maybe that's the case. That's totally fair. Did you see Croc's tweet about Trey should ask for a trade? No, I didn't. And I if I know Croc the way that I think I know Croc, he's probably saying it in the same manner that I am, that if he is not the guy and they know he's not the guy, he should ask for a trade. But maybe it was different. Maybe the context is different, Davo. I'm not sure. But that's the way that I would imagine that he would see it as. I don't know. Yeah, Quinn. It is Quinn. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. That's why the chat's awesome. They always pick us up when we forget names. It's hard to remember everybody's name. It's hard.
Chat check, fact check.
All right. I think there's this thought going around that the 49ers are a lock to win the NFC West next year. The Rams are down bad. They lost Bobby Wagner. They're probably not going to be great next year. We know the Cardinals are, I mean, I don't know what's going on over in AZ. But Seattle is lurking, and I know the 49ers beat them 3 times this year, but Seattle is on the rise, I believe. Do you think that this upcoming year Seattle can be legit to where they can take a win away from the 49ers, possibly split, and really contend for the NFC West? Or are they a year away from being a year away, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if the 49ers are going to sweep the NFC West like they did last season. I do think Seattle will be good enough to split. It's always tough to win in Seattle for the 49ers. So I think that game is always 50-50. But do I think that Seattle could really contend for NFC championship or NFC and the NFC West? I don't think so. I think the 49ers are still much better of a roster, right? Seattle's still building, and they do have the first round picks, but I don't know if they're going to bring in any kind of impact player that's going to automatically change where some of their weaknesses are, right? So they're thinking about maybe bringing in a young quarterback and re-signing Geno. I don't know. So if they start with the brand new quarterback, like a rookie quarterback, then of course they're probably a year or two away kind of situation. So yeah, I think Seattle is going to be the second best team in the NFC West. I still think that the 49ers are the favorites, and there's a significant gap between them and Seattle.
Yeah, Marco, Plus Gene Sports, make sure you check him out. Have you guys talked Trey Lance? We actually just got done talking it was impromptu. It wasn't like on purpose. It wasn't a topic, but somebody had asked a question about Lance and Purdy and confidence level in Trey Lance from the coaching staff. And so we got into it a little bit. But if there's anything that you want to drop on us here, you can feel free to do so, Mr. Insider. I would appreciate it.
Or text me so it makes me look smart. Text me so it makes me look smart.
Yeah, so I don't know. As far as Seattle, I think Seattle, they might be a year away from being a year away, but I think they're pretty damn close because you look at the structure of that team. They had 2 rookie offensive tackles that improved a ton throughout the year. They're going to be seasoned now. Geno Smith isn't great, but at least it provides them some stability at the quarterback position, more so than what the 49ers have at this point. I mean, we can say whatever we want about Geno, but he played at a pretty high level. Not great. I don't think he's a guy that's going to go win you a Super Bowl or anything like that, but I think he played at a pretty high level, and I think he could possibly duplicate that again next year, and he brings stability. They're also going to get Jamal Adams back, which is going to be huge. They have 2 first-round draft picks. Now we'll see. They might be in on Richardson or one of these other quarterbacks and take one of them if they fall to him. Or they might just take 2 really good players. I would imagine they're at least going to come away with an edge rusher one way or another out of this first round. So I think Seattle could be right there. I mean, certainly the 49ers top to bottom should have a better roster, but you look at all the rookies that contributed from their running back to their tackles to 2 corners, they're going to be much improved next year, having a season under their belt and going through it and making it to the playoffs. So I think Seattle's closer than what a lot of people think they are. Do I think the 49ers should be the favorite to win the division, even with the quarterback situation? Sure. But I won't be shocked if Seattle jumps up and beats them at least for a game next year and makes this thing tighter than what it was this year.
Yeah, I don't expect it to be tight. I don't expect the 49ers to be the same team that they were last year. I think they're going to get better too. They obviously have a new defensive coordinator. Great question, Caesar. Defensive coordinator that I think is going to solidify what is quote unquote the weakness of the 49ers defense, which is, the back end DBs and safeties. I also think they're going to be pretty aggressive in free agency to fix some of the holes in defense, namely pieces that could help stop the run kind of thing, or, and get more pressure on the quarterback. So, and just like Seattle had a lot of rookies that contributed, so the 49ers, man. 49ers have a lot of young players that are going to be a year older, and you would expect to take another leap, right? Guys like Aaron Banks, guys like Spencer Burford, guys like Lenore, Womack, Hufanga. These are young guys that played meaningful time last season that are now going to be, leaders of the team in the sense that they've been there and went through a deep playoff run and played well. Also, that next wave of young guys that didn't get a chance last season are going to come out. Like we saw what Hufanga, who didn't get much playing time, did his full year as a starter. Could a Drake Jackson turn into that guy? Could Kalia Davis? Could Zakeel? Like, there's players that might get an opportunity now that could help elevate the team as well. So it's not just Seattle that's getting better. I think the 49ers are going to get better, which is why I still think there's a significant gap in between those 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers, I said it on Jack's show, are very SEC in the NFL, meaning they always have an abundance of talent that is just waiting to play. It's like, okay, we lost so-and-so. You think they're going to take a back step, and here comes this guy that nobody's heard of, and he's just as good, if not better than the guy previous. Right. It's like they're playing in the SEC, but in the NFL, they always have a stable of guys ready to go. It's an incredible thing, and I think having quarterbacks on that rookie deal is a big reason why, no doubt about it. So, yes, I think the Seahawks will be better. I could see a scenario where the 49ers are better as well, and so that's completely fair to say. Marco is pitching in saying that Lance and Purdy were both elite on the psychological test. Yeah, we didn't get into that actually, but there definitely was, Barrows had written an article And it really made it sound like Purdy was just so good on this aptitude test. And, Trey Lance was above average, but, it wasn't as good as Purdy. We found out later that wasn't necessarily the case. We heard from Schefter, who had actually said in 2021 that he scored extremely high on that same test. You have said that he scored extremely high on that same test. And in fact, you talked to the guy, and I don't know if he's still coming on your channel or what's going on, but you talked.
No, they just did the show.
Oh, you just did the show. Okay.
He just texted me. So should I read it? All right,
perfect. So you just did the show. You had the gentleman who runs the tests on your show, and he said that Lance was also elite in that test. So,
this is what Marco just texted me. So I'll text you. I'll read out what he just said.
Read it. Go ahead.
So he said, based on report from Brandon Alloy, who's the guy that he interviewed and the guy that administers his test, he believes Trey can be successful due to psychological tests and getting reps. Stated a safety from Tennessee tested elite at the first 4 years, struggled to see the field until year 5. After actually just getting reps, said Trey just needs reps, based on a report from his show. So basically, the testing based where Trey tested, and he said he'd get us the numbers after the show. Based off of that and the trajectory of what people that have tested that have shown in the league, it shows that Trey could be extremely successful in the league. The only issue is he hasn't gotten enough reps. So he has the mental fortitude to be able to do it. Can he stay healthy long enough and get the reps to actually build into that? That's the question mark.
Okay. Yeah. So basically the test is designed for players that have more playing time to do better in, because they've seen more. And it's from what I understand, I don't know the full ins and outs of the test, but it is like a quickness test. It's a memory test, and it has to do with actual football. And so players that have more playing time will score higher anyways. Like the baseline is higher for those players than the players that have not. However, Trey, for where his playing level and experience level, scored at an elite level for his range of players that have put in the amount of time he has, meaning he's on that same trajectory. So anyways, I just
go watch Marco's show if you want to understand it more.
For sure. And watch Clutch Gene Sports. He's got it right there. So if you read the Barros article, then this will give you some clarity as to what actually is the situation. I just hated the way that they broke that down and made it seem like Lance was a dummy. I hated that. And a lot of people took that and ran with it, and that's just not the case. I'm sorry. So next on that one, Caesar says, do you see a more aggressive defense with the new DC? Well, I'll say this. I think we saw a more aggressive defense with D'Amico than we did with Saleh. I think a lot of that is predicated on Shanahan and what he is comfortable with and what he wants to do. So, I think we could. I think we've got a guy who's going to coach up the secondary and probably make them a little bit tighter and a little bit better. And when you have a good secondary, then you can start sending more people at the quarterback. So I think you definitely have the makings of it to be that, Caesar. I don't know what Shanahan's comfortable with. And I think he plays a big, big part in what they want to do on defense. And I think we hear that in the way that Shanahan, or they talk about Shanahan and his input on the defense, believe it or not. Double B Studio says Seahawks are legit because Kyle is conservative. Well, I'll say this. They've got a really good coach. That we know. They've got a really, really good coach. So that is extremely important. His score was the top, wasn't? No, it wasn't the top. It was up there, but it wasn't the top. And I think he's talking about Purdy. No, it wasn't. It was in that. It was in that really, really high mark. But again, this is not a Wonderlic test. Marco got straight to the guy because Marco had heard other than what the article had actually said. He had heard that Trey Lance was also extremely high, and the article made it seem as if he was not. And so he did what? He talked to the guy that ran the test, who confirmed what Marco had heard. So
yeah, so the The test, just a brief overview, is a post-snap test that tests 9 different cognitive areas for post-snap play. So
Okay.
it's to test how they read the play happening, obviously. So Trey's scores are in line with successful quarterbacks in the league. So that's what Marco was trying to tell us.
Perfect. Thank you, Marco. Appreciate you. I didn't realize that was tonight. Now I'm pissed that I had shows and missed it, but I'm going to go back and watch it after this. Check out Clutch Gene Sports because there's some good chatter over there. Okay. So you saw my tweet today.
Yeah.
Where I said it's a year later and the quarterback position really hasn't changed. Last year, here's some of the things we were talking about. And I went back and watched some of the old shows to make sure that this was in line. We were talking about, is Trey Lance the guy? Is he going to be the starter? We were talking about Jimmy Garoppolo's surgery that kind of came out of nowhere and how that messed up the offseason plans. I think that's similar to what we're seeing with Brock Purdy, although it's messing it up in a different light. We were talking about a retired Tom Brady coming out of retirement to come play one more with San Francisco. And we were talking about Aaron Rodgers getting traded to the San Francisco 49ers. And here we are 1 year later, and a lot of the chatter is exactly the same, believe it or not. So I am on record saying the 49ers do not have assets to go get Aaron Rodgers. And I do believe for the most part that is true. I will throw a scenario out there in that maybe if the 49ers were able to trade Trey Lance to, let's say, the Panthers, who were in on him prior to the draft, maybe they can go get a second and a third round pick for Trey. They can add that to what they had this year and say, all right, we're going to give you 2 second round picks, 4 third round picks, and our first round pick next year. And they can go get a trade for Aaron Rodgers done. Maybe. The question actually, though, is this. And this was brought to me by the Real Niner Mike in Spaces. I thought it was a great question. If they start to sniff around with these veteran quarterbacks, like an Aaron Rodgers, whether they can get them or not, what does that tell you about the state of where the 49ers are at this very moment?
I don't think it necessarily says anything. I mean, they were interested in Aaron Rodgers when they were drafted Trey, right? Remember, they made it quite clear that when there was some issues they felt there might be some issues at Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, they made the call to see if that was interested for them. I think there's already been a precedent where the 49ers are constantly looking to upgrade the quarterback position, right? And I just think that I don't necessarily think that doing their due diligence, quote unquote, necessarily means they don't believe in what they have. I think when you have a level of player like Aaron Rodgers and he's out there, and if there's a chance you could get him, I think that you got to look into it. Now, how realistic is Aaron Rodgers coming to the 49ers? I think if we're doing it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put it at like a 2 or a 3. I mean, Aaron Rodgers himself has come out and said he's not coming to the 49ers, right? Like, of all the teams that he mentioned he wasn't going to go to, the 49ers was the only team that he mentioned he wouldn't go to. Typically, when a team is trading someone within the conference, you have to overpay. And I don't think the 49ers can even have enough to like be a legitimate underpay offer to even be close to an overpay, right? So I think it's just talk because it's slow content time. But in reality, there's enough teams in the AFC that are willing to dish out assets for Aaron Rodgers. And if he does get traded, I think he's going to be in the AFC.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is, of course, where does the rumor come from? None other than Mike Silver himself writes an article and says, well, the 49ers should sniff around and see if Brady's willing to come back for 1 year and get himself a ring to separate himself even more from Mahomes just in case. And if not, they should go after Aaron Rodgers. And again, I think for the most part, it is a pipe dream trying to get Aaron Rodgers traded within the NFC. But one thing that at least opened up the door, and I do believe that Aaron Rodgers likely does get dealt because they've got to they've got to turn the team over to Love, because Love is in a similar situation where Davo had asked the question about Trey Lance, and why would we say that Trey Lance should ask for a trade if he's not the guy? Love is in that same situation. If he's not going to play this year, it's like, dude, at what point do I just say, get me out of here? Like, enough is enough. We're going into what, year 4?
Mm-hmm.
Year 4 with him? I mean, come on, man. He's gotten better each year. We've seen little glimpses. Aaron Rodgers is getting older. You're not winning a Super Bowl with Rodgers. Now you can get assets for Rodgers. Now is the time to make that move. And so I think that it is likely that Rodgers gets dealt, or at least they make a real push at it. I think it is unlikely that it's San Francisco, but again, the rumors remain the same a year later. And I think if they start going that route, or at least looking that route, then that kind of goes back to our conversation a couple topics ago, where maybe they don't necessarily fully believe in these rookies, Trey or Purdy, to be frank. I mean, it's nice that Purdy was able to get him some wins, and it was great that they spent all those assets on Trey, but none of those can trump a guy who's done it in this league. And so I think that would make things really interesting. I think at that point you would have to also move on from Trey Lance. Again, I think he'd have to be a part of it, not necessarily going to Green Bay because they have a guy, but some movement would have to happen, and Trey Lance would be involved. So I don't know. We'll see.
I could see them, and this is me just thinking after hearing you, if they do believe Purdy's the guy, I could see them going after Aaron Rodgers, because now Purdy most likely won't be ready to be a starter. So give him a year to fully get that elbow healthy. I think the reason why they you think about Aaron Rodgers is, look, I have friends that are Eagles fans, friends that are, Cowboy fans, and all over the league, right? And they say if Aaron Rodgers is a 49er, 49ers are hands down favorite to win the Super Bowl, right? Because you take this roster, this defense, and then the talent that Aaron Rodgers has with the talent that's going to be around him. Aaron Rodgers would be handing the ball off to CMC, being able to throw the ball to Debo, Kittle, and Aiyuk. We saw what Aaron Rodgers could do with just one good receiver in Devontae Adams, right? So to be able to have 4 options, and I don't think he's ever had a defense as good as the 49ers defense, you would think hands down Super Bowl favorite. So if the 49ers are just like, yo, we need to get the Super Bowl, and we could get, if that's the ultimate goal, right? And for a lot of the fan base, Jesse, that's what they're telling me. Hey, constantly competitive doesn't matter. It's Super Bowl or bust. So if it's just win a Super Bowl and that's all that matters, yeah, go get Aaron Rodgers. He's going to give you the best chance. Not maybe 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Most likely that's going to be Trey Lance or Purdy. But this year in a vacuum, if only winning a Super Bowl this year matters, Aaron Rodgers is better than Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, and would give you the best chance to win a Super Bowl. So back to my point, if they do believe Purdy can be that guy, it makes sense. If they can get something for Trey, and they have some kind of like backroom deal with Green Bay, and they think they could get Aaron Rodgers, that would make sense. Keep Aaron Rodgers here for a year. I think if Aaron Rodgers win a Super Bowl, he's probably retired and go into the wilderness, right? And then you have Purdy there, had a whole year to get healthy, and then
that was a slick comment by you, and I caught it, and I hope everybody else did. That was hilarious. So Stovey 4x4ing, I guess in what sense? Because I agree with you. I would think for the most part, from an asset standpoint, they can't afford Rodgers. From a salary standpoint, they absolutely can, because Rodgers is only going to cost his new team $15.79 million this season. So if he's traded, because so much of that money is being eaten by the Green Bay Packers, it's only $15.79 million to that new team. So they can certainly afford him when it comes to the cap. He's not actually going to be that much at all, but it's the assets. And I think that's where it gets a little shaky. So I hear what you're saying. Again, I don't think that it's like the biggest, for sure, but I think it's interesting that a year later, the rumors really haven't changed a
Yeah.
lot.
And I mean, it makes sense because there isn't a bona fide, like even Trey Lance, you and me are two of the biggest guys on Trey Lance. We've always been pro Trey Lance. But even us, we're still going off of projected, what we believe he could be and all that kind of stuff. Until Trey Lance shows us that he's the guy, we could at least see a whole season and he goes 13-4, or whatever, and deep playoff run and into the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. And we could be like, see, we told you. Until that time, it's always going to be, a rumor of how do you upgrade the quarterback situation, because 49ers haven't had stability at quarterback throughout the Shanahan regime.
Yeah, for sure. I thought the comment was funny, so I put it up, Emiliano. But I think anybody that watches this show would say two things. One, I put up as many, if not more, comments than most. And I am definitely not afraid. I put up a lot of comments that are not fans of what I'm saying. And I'll definitely rebuttal them. And then I have a call-in show pretty much every week where people can call in and say what they want. And people disagree with me. That's cool too. So I don't know if he necessarily meant it seriously. It's hard to say with text, man. I don't know. But I know that that's definitely not at all the case. So I appreciate you though. Right? That's what I'm saying. Just watch a few shows. You'll see that dude, almost every week I get at least one where I'm like, this guy doesn't like me. Let's talk about it. So it's all good. Okay, well let's talk about some things that are a little bit more realistic. Wentz just got cut. Mariota got cut. I don't know if you remember, but last offseason we were talking about guys that we really want to be 49ers, and Mariota was my guy. I was hoping they can get rid of Jimmy. Mariota, I thought, would be the perfect backup to Trey Lance because some of the play style stuff, but also because he was a high pick with a lot of expectations, didn't necessarily live up to those expectations, and really could kind of be there for Trey Lance from just a question standpoint. Listen, I know what you're going through. This is a lot of pressure. Let me help you out. Really, really good kid. I like Marcus Mariota a lot. Obviously, I'm an Oregon Duck fan, so no surprise there. But now he's available again. What do you think about these guys? And I think it's fair to say, before we get into it, that a lot of this depends on Purdy's injury. Because I don't know how many of these guys that we're going to talk about are guys that would necessarily take a third string role, although Wentz might fit under that. I mean, he's down bad right now. But how would you feel about either of these guys being the backup for Trey Lance if Purdy's out, let's say 9 months?
Yeah. I think both are intriguing. Obviously, Wentz has a relationship with Trey Lance already, coming from NDSU. I know I was on Jack's show on Monday, and I said, if they bring Wentz in, you guys just need to make a call out to Coach Avery and just get him on the 49ers staff. Because at that point, he might as well just be something in that quarterback's room because he has all his guys there, right? But for me, it would be Mariota over Wentz. I think Mariota still has some game in him. Going to Mariota in the case, God forbid, Trey Lance gets injured and Mariota needs to play, I don't think you need to change the scheme too much because they could do similar things on the field. But I think, and realistically, I think that Wentz still has an opportunity with Frank Reich, right? Over there in Carolina, I would pretty much bet, I wouldn't bet my house or whatever, but I would say there's more chance Wentz is a Carolina Panther than not. I think out of all the teams, him and Frank Reich or Frank Reich, I don't know how you pronounce it, but they have a good relationship together. Obviously, they traded assets to get Carson Wentz when he was the coach at Indianapolis. So to get him for no assets, I think he would be willing to do that. But I think the biggest question is what you mentioned, right? I think both of these guys still want to be starters in the league. So do they feel like they'd have that opportunity if Purdy is available? Because most likely these guys are going to be not suited up on the sideline if that's the case, right? So it might be a pipe dream, but if I had a choice between these two, I think Mariota, hands down, is a better fit for the 49ers than Wentz at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I say that, but then also I do know that Wentz and Lance have that NDSU connection. I do know that they've worked together in the offseason prior, so they are familiar with each other. I think Wentz is your starter can be a bit of a drag in the locker room, a little bit from a different standpoint. Like you hear about locker room problems and they're like kind of malcontents. Wentz isn't necessarily that, but he's just kind of blah from what you hear and doesn't really like hang out with people or care to make friends with people. And so that can be a drag as the leader of the organization. But when you're the backup quarterback, it's not as big of a deal. And as long as you are supporting the starter, which I think he would in this scenario, I would be fine with either one. Personally, I would prefer Mariota as well. And it looks like the chat, definitely agrees with that. Everybody was like, Mariota, 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 Mariota. So I agree. Although I will say this, as big of a Mariota fan as I am, Mariota did kind of weasel his way out of the Falcons, and the way that he acted towards the tail end of the season was a little out of character. So, he's got some weird things kind of going on as well. So I'm not really sure. Not really sure. But yeah, that's that I think those are two guys to keep an eye on, and we'll know more. The good thing is before free agency starts and that legal tampering period starts, which I believe that starts on the 12th or the 13th, then you've got, that either Brock Purdy has had a surgery and what the result of that surgery is, or he hasn't had surgery. And I think, if the results are, hey, we're looking at a 9-month recovery, or he hasn't had the surgery, I think either way, you got to really start looking at a legit backup for this team. Because at that point, if you push the surgery even 2 more weeks, he's 100% not going to be ready by week 1. So you have to find a way to get one of these guys, not necessarily one of these guys, but somebody on the market as a backup. And I would take either one of them. That's me personally.
Yeah. I think and we're just listing 2 names. There's a lot of backup caliber quarterbacks that are in the market right now. So I think if they needed one, this is the right year to need one, because there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah. See, I mean, we did go a little diva. He went a little diva, no doubt about it. Lynch tipped his hand by saying he'll be on the vet market. Okay. I mean, maybe that's the case. And I think that they've got to at least start to consider it, at least as a third string. My question is, how much does that market change if Purdy is ready around the 6-month time mark? Because again, the Wentzes and Mariotas probably aren't going to want to be third stringers. Heineke isn't going to want to be a third stringer. I think you look at most of these guys and say, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, these guys aren't going to want to be third string guys. So who doesn't find a job, and then who is willing to be a third string quarterback? I don't know. I think that gets actually pretty interesting. So
but there's not a lot. I mean, I don't know. I haven't done deep dive, but I have looked at the amount of quarterbacks that are on the market. I would assume there's not that many backup quarterback situations there either. So it's going to be kind of musical chairs where eventually the backup QB market is going to be run its course, and some of these guys just have to get in where they fit in, type of thing. So, and I think once again, the 49ers is now a free agent destination because of the culture here, because of Kyle Shanahan, because of the success that this team has. If I'm a player, and even if I'm a backup for half the season because Purdy is, rehabbing or whatever the case may be, that might be a case where, I come here, be a backup, and if Purdy's healthy, maybe I get a chance to get traded or cut, type of situation, and I could still get on with another team because of what I've been able to showcase with the 49ers type of thing. So I don't know. I think they'll be fine. I think it's a very important position for the 49ers, and I don't think that they'll not have a solution there, knowing that last season they went to their 4th string, right? So they understand how important having quarterbacks there are for them.
Third string all pro. Hey Jesse, what's up with the ads during a live feed? That must be new. Because I can turn ads on or off. Obviously, I'm going to leave them on because that's how you get paid, but not during a live stream. I've never seen that. So, question for you, third string: was it skippable, or was it something you had to watch? And how many did you get? I'm just out of curiosity. That's got to be something new. I've never heard that.
I know sometimes it comes on when you first got into the stream. So, like if you just got on the stream, they play an ad first, and then you could then there's no stream. So maybe he just logged in.
Maybe. I don't know. I think he's been here for a while though, because he was the one that made the I think he's the one that made the comment about I only put up things that stroke my ego or whatever. Which by the way, sounds like he was joking, which is I thought he was too. But yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, it is a new thing. Jesse, the ad that was skippable after 5 seconds. Interesting. That is something new, and probably have to turn that off, because that's really annoying, and I don't want to make you guys go through that. So I apologize. That has to be something new, and I'll have to make sure on the next live stream it is turned off. So my apologies, y'all. Thank you for sticking with me either way. Actually, that makes a lot of sense, because I was seeing a lot of big, like 20, 30 people fluxes where like we'd be at like 210 live and we'd drop down to like 170, probably because of the ads, and then it'd come right back up. So that makes a lot of sense. So apologize. I will make sure that's turned off going forward.
Jesse's content is these companies are wanting to get prime real estate on.
It's like a Super Bowl ad at this point. So it's big money to get on Last Second Sports. No doubt about it.
CPM is rising. CPM, baby.
All right, y'all. Listen, I appreciate y'all for tapping in. I'm going to be on with Grant tomorrow and Larry Krueger on their channels. We'll probably do a call in on Thursday. If you are not subscribed, please do so. We are so close to 10K. We are so damn close to 10K. So tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Hit the like button. It helps the algorithm. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to Suneil's channel. Link is in the description. And make sure you subscribe also to Clutch Gene Sports and go check out that interview. I'm curious to see how that thing played out as well. Appreciate y'all. Much love. Peace.